next couple of minutes or so, but I think we'll get going. Okay, so let me just spotlight my screen for everyone so you can see me. Lovely stuff. Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Pete. For those of you who are new and haven't joined us for any of the other sessions yet, my name is Pete. I'm the director of a social media marketing company based in the Southwest, so based in Taunton and Exeter. And I'm the one taking you for this social media content session this morning. So before I start talking to you about everything we're going to cover and when we start getting into the nitty-gritty of it all, I just want to talk you through a few logistics. So we've got 2 hours, we've got 10 till 12. I will probably work in a 5-minute break halfway through, roughly, just a chance to grab another coffee, grab a glass of water, something like that. And yeah, so you will have time to do that sort of thing. The whole session is being recorded, so you will have access to it after today's session as well. So please make as many notes as you want to, but you will have access to a recording of the session. I'll also be sending over the presentation that I'm going to be using, so you'll be able to look at that as well and sort of pick that apart. So please feel free to make as many notes as you think is appropriate, but you will have quite a lot in the way of resources afterwards that you'll be able to look back on. If you have questions as we go through, if you want to see something demonstrated, if you want to ask for more detail on something, please do just fire away and let me know. I will try and leave some time for Q&A at the end, but if you've got questions as we go through, don't feel that you have to wait. Please feel free to just jump in and ask any questions as we go. You can use the chat function to do that, which I'll be monitoring as we go through. But also, if you want to just sort of dive in with a question and just sort of shout out metaphorically, then please do so. I think that's probably all I need to say logistically. So I know that some of the people who are attending this workshop attended a similar one I did a few weeks ago, which was an hour long. For those of you who fall into that bracket, there are a couple of elements that you will recognize. So some of the things that I talked about in those sessions, I will be talking about today. But today is a lot more detailed. We go a lot further than we did in that session. And there's also a range of activities and so on included within today. So rather than me mentioning something, it will be a lot more detail, and there's a chance that you'll have 10-15 minutes to actually action something or to play with it or to have a go with it. So if you have come to this session, a session similar to this a couple of weeks ago, don't be alarmed if you see a bit of crossover. Those of you that are new, obviously everything today will be completely new to you, and I hope you find it really useful. So I'm just going to change the view on my screen. The view that you will have most of the time today will be the presentation, but there are times when I'm going to be doing some demonstrations. So some of the software we use, for example, I'm going to be doing demonstrations as to how exactly it works. And I might be showing you a couple of Facebook features and things like that. So it'll be a combination of presentation with us all hidden in the corner and live demonstrations. So let me just change the view on my screen a second. Let's get through to the presentation. Okay, lovely. So you should all now be able to see the presentation on your screen. Hopefully that's the case. Yeah, good stuff. Okay, so let's work our way through. In terms of the rough outline of today's session and the things that we're going to be looking at, the main elements that we're going to be focusing on, we're going to start with a case study activity. So I'm going to get you looking at other people's social media activity and talking about the things you like and the things you don't like. Don't forget today that everything is built around content. So there will be some technical things that we will mention, but generally it's about how to create great content, how to draw in engagement, how to reach more people, and it's not overly technical. We're not looking at too many features. It's just about content themes, what works, what doesn't work, things that you like, things that you don't like, and so on. And the case study activity is a great place to start with that. So we'll get to that in a second. We will then talk a little bit as well about the analysis of your current performance. So looking at the stats as to what you're already doing and what you can learn from that. So those two activities that you'll have time to play with actually work together really well to give you a really good idea of what's working for you currently and what's also working for other people. And then after that, essentially, I will take over and hand over all of our biggest top tips when it comes to social media content. So that's going to do with things like software we use, different tools, different apps that we use regularly. We're going to talk about things like the power of live content, so things like live video, but also things like stories on Instagram. And then I'm going to share with you some key themes to do with social media content. And as part of that, we're going to look at things like best length of post for different platforms, best time of day to post on different platforms, granular detail on some of the small things that all add up together and can make a really big difference when it comes to putting your content together. And then we'll be finishing off by sharing with you a formula that we use for our social media content ourselves. I'm hopeful that we'll have a little bit of time for you to do that and then feed back to us. But if not, it's something that you'll then take out of today's session. But there's a really good mix today of me dropping a lot of information on you, but also you guys having a really good opportunity to play with things and have a good look through and discover some information for yourself as well. Okay, so what I wanted to do to get started, one of the great things about social media is obviously the public nature of it. And one of the things that this allows us to do is to learn from what others are doing on social media. And this is often something that people sort of forget about. We get very tunnel vision about our own organization and sort of think, okay, well, this is what we do. I'm going to push this, I'm going to push this, I'm going to push this. It's a really good idea for us to just sort of take a step back at times and look at what others are doing and see what's working well for them, especially if they're a business that, or an organization, sorry, that has a similar sort of audience that you might have. So what I want us to do just to get started today is a bit of a case study activity. And I've given a couple of examples on here that you can use to get yourself started if you'd like to. And I want you to just look at these specific organizations, have a look at their content specifically and see what things you like about what they're doing and what things you don't like. That's all I want for a minute. Very simple. Doesn't need to go into loads of detail. Just what do you like and what don't you like about their content specifically. So I'm not interested in sort of the look of their page. I'm not interested in how often they're posting, particularly just anything that you notice about the posts themselves. Now you can do this on any platform. So you can do this on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or X, as I need to start calling it, LinkedIn, anything that you're using, please feel free to use the platform of your choice for that. And I have put a couple of examples on the screen here for you. So the first one on there is Innocent Smoothies. They're always an interesting case study. They are worth looking at and just seeing what you think about what they're doing and whether you like it or not. And then I've put a couple of examples local to us that are within the sort of sporting arena in particular. So SASP Somerset Sports and Somerset Sports and Activity Partnership, I believe it stands for, and Get Outside in Somerset. So you'll find them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, both of them. So please feel free to use those as examples if you want to get you started. But also, if there are other organizations more local to you or ones that you know of that you'd be interested to take a look at, please feel free to use them. That's absolutely fine. And that's essentially it. So the key thing I'm looking for, things you like about their content, things you don't like about your content. What I'd love you to do then while you're doing that is if you can use the chat function just to put some information in there as we go, then once you guys have had 5-10 minutes to have a good look through, I'll be able to go through that and feed back some information and tell you what I think about it, basically. So I'd like us to just have between 5 and 10 minutes to do this. Please use the chat function to put your thoughts into and let me know what you think. And then after 10 minutes, I'll come back and we'll have a good look through everything and talk through it all. Any questions, please let me know using the chat. But yeah, 5-10 minutes or so. Away you go. Okay, so for those who just joined, we're just doing a quick case study activity. All the information is on the slide in front of you. Just want you to have a look at some other organizations and let me know the things that you like and the things that you don't like about their social media content. If you've got any feedback, please just stick it in the chat and then I'm going to go through and talk through everything that everybody's mentioned. Okay, great to see some feedback starting to come in. Thank you for that. Please keep it coming from everybody. That would be great. Positive and negative. If there's something you see that you really don't like as well, I want to hear about that too. Okay, there's some really good observations coming in, so thank you for that. We've still got another 5-6 minutes or so, so there's plenty of time. Please feel free to look at other businesses. Please feel free to look at the same business on multiple platforms and see if there's a difference between them. Go about this however you want to do so. Lots of love for innocent smoothies, which is always good to see. No surprise. Okay, so we've got about 4 minutes left, and then I'll start working my way through your feedback. Okay, so the last couple of minutes or so. Any burning thoughts, please do get them in the chat so I can talk through them. Okay, 1 more minute. So there's a couple of bits of feedback coming in now, which is great. Last minute, any thoughts, please get them down, and then we'll talk through them in just a second. Okay, so we've had about 10 minutes or so, so I think I'll start working my way through your feedback. If you've got more, please keep it coming in, because by the time I've scrolled down and talked through bits, I'll be able to get to that. So please keep it coming if you've got some extra thoughts as well. It's great to see so many of you taking a look at innocent smoothies. They are a really interesting case study because they're quite unique. They're quite different. They don't necessarily follow some of the classic rules, but they do some of the others as well. So they're always interesting to look at. There's a couple of really key points with innocent smoothies that the feedback that you guys have given has really picked up on. One of the key elements is that they very rarely promote their products, if at all. And yet, despite that, they have one of the most widely recognized social media presences out there. Now, that should tell us something. Now, I understand, obviously, innocent smoothies are a huge worldwide brand. They don't necessarily need to talk about what they do all the time. However, it is still something that we can learn from and something that we can take from what they're doing. Now, if they just focus on their products all the time, people are going to get very, very bored of their presence. They're not going to get engagement. They're not going to reach lots of people. So they've decided to flip that on its head. And you could argue that they've gone slightly too far the other way, but it works for them. So that's absolutely fine. The fact that they don't focus on their products, it means that they focus on the brand. They get people to invest in the organization itself, which of course will then lead to things like more sales. And that's the thing that we always need to remember with social media content. There's always this feeling that if you want to sell more tickets, get people signing up for things, sell more products, we need to post about those things more and more. Actually, because of the way social media works, that's not always going to work for you. And getting across a decent level of personality is something we're going to talk about a lot today. So that's going to keep coming up as we go through. And that's something that you guys have mentioned quite a lot in the feedback that you've shared already. So a little bit more innocent, so friendly and conversational, not trying to push their products too much. Friendly, conversational, another word that we use sometimes that's along those lines is approachable. So when you see their social media presence, you feel like you can come and get involved in it. It's not overly corporate, it's not pushing you away in any way, which is something, again, that we will talk about a lot as we go through. Keep working my way through. I'm not trying to say anything. Video has been mentioned. Video is something that will come up a lot today. And when we get to the sort of software section a bit later on, a lot of the things I'm going to introduce you to revolve around video content. Video will always be, is always likely to be your best performing content. Now, that's not, cast iron. There will be examples where that isn't the case. But let's say if you're posting video regularly, when you go into the stats, which is something we're going to look at in a second, it's likely you'll notice that video content tends to get a better response than anything else. The algorithms within the social media platforms love them. And we as consumers and as people who use these platforms, we love them as well. If you see video content when you're scrolling through Instagram or you're scrolling through your Facebook feed, that's the content that's going to make you stop and pay attention as a general rule. So video is always something that's going to work well. So a little bit more on innocence, so they don't focus on the products too much, but it is still relevant to the company, which is a really good point. Relevancy is a really important word when it comes to social media content. And although Innocent are not necessarily posting about their products, they are posting about things that are related to them as an organization. So they're not just posting about random things for the sake of it. Everything comes back to the nature of their organization and the nature of their brand. And it all comes together in that way. So they're not just posting randomly. Everything is done, and it's still clear to the likes of ourselves that this is coming from Innocent Smoothies. We can still tell that when we see that content. And building on the idea of relevancy, there's an interesting point from Izzy here just about Spotify Wrapped. So obviously Spotify in and of itself is not a social media platform, but they've come up with this concept basically of at the end of the year, everybody shares what they've been listening to across their own social media over the course of the last 12 months. That's the sort of thing that, because it will be trending basically, so lots of people will be doing it, lots of people will be talking about it, that sort of content becomes relevant for almost everybody then. And it comes into the concept, it's bringing you into the idea of jumping on things that are going on in the outside world, things that are trending, things that lots of people are talking about. How can you use these things in your content? Is something, again, we'll talk about a bit later on, but something always worth having in the back of your mind. That's the sort of thing as well. It's taking you into relevancy. You're thinking about things like Halloween, obviously back to school has just come and gone, half term as and when it arrives, and of course Christmas, which when I strolled in somewhere the other day, I think it was Sainsbury's, I'm already seeing Christmas chocolate being advertised, which I love Christmas. I'm not a Grinch on it in any sense, but it did surprise me. I had to say, I think it was still August when I saw that. Bit more on instant. So posts are varied, not promotional, humor and light-hearted content. Humor is something that if you can do it and get it across is worth doing. It's not very easy. That's the problem. Getting humor across in sort of black and white writing through a computer is not always easy to do. They do it very well. If you can do it, it is something that will always garner engagement. But there's a really good point in that little message as well about variety. Variety is a hugely important word when it comes to social media content. And a lot of what we do in the second half of today is built around that concept alone. We can't fall into the pattern of doing the same thing in the same format repeatedly. And I'll explain why that is a bit more later on. So that's a really good observation. From Beth, so I like London sports use of storytelling, real people being interviewed, gives you a bit more connection to the cause. This is a really important point as well. It sounds like a bit of a buzzword, and it probably is, but authenticity really matters when it comes to social media content. Sharing stuff that people will look at and think, I can relate to that because they are real people telling real stories on the ground, will increase the amount of engagement that you get with your social media content by 2, 3, 4, 5 times. It's a hugely important element to it. And again, I will talk about that more later on. You want people to feel that your content is accessible and feel that the things you're talking about are actually real and not a brochure that you've had produced and you've had someone come in and do £1,000 worth of photography of stock, people laughing while they're doing whatever it is your organization offers. It needs to be something that comes across as real and authentic. And you can see from that feedback, it does make a difference. It does resonate with people. Very repetitive. So a good point here from Luke. So a lot of the innocent posts are text-based graphics, which can run the risk of feeling repetitive to followers, even if it's mixed with other content. It's a really good point. So we just talked about variety before and how important that is. You always have to balance the idea of having a feature that you do that's the same and you want to do repeatedly. You have to balance that out with making sure that it doesn't become repetitive and doesn't start to disengage your audience. So that's a really good point. Even though Innocent Smoothies are doing a lot of great things, if they have this one way of doing things and they do that repeatedly, that could cause an issue for them down the line. So that's a good point. So SASP on Instagram, they're using a lot of graphics, a lot of designed content. Is this important? So a good question. The joy of graphics and things like that, and we are going to do a bit of a run through later on how to create some of these things, is they allow you to get a lot of information across very, very quickly. The visual is very important when it comes to social media content. That sounds like an obvious point, but if you are looking at things like, for example, events, and you've got a date, a time, a location, yes, you can put all that in your copy of your writing, but actually if you can get that onto a graphic or onto the visual, people will take it in much more quickly and much more easily. So the ability to create your own designed content and your own graphics would give you freedom to get more information into the visual, which is really where it is most powerful. So it is worth doing at times. There are other times when you've got a brilliant photo and you don't need to touch it and you don't want to. But the ability, putting yourself in a position where you feel comfortable creating your own graphics would definitely add another sort of string to your bow. There we go, got there in the end. Get outside Somerset, good mix of film and strong imagery. Absolutely. So again, we've got that variety idea coming through. The use of people in their photos as well. So making sure that we've got smiling faces and something that's relatable. However, does their brand come through on Facebook in particular? Not necessarily. So that's a really good bit of feedback as well. Do you have specific colors, for example, that you have associated with your organization? If so, are they coming through in your content? Do you have a specific font that you use each time? These are all things that matter, and you want to reinforce with the posting that you do. The more of that you do, the more recognizable you are when you pop up in people's feeds. So that is something that does matter. Get outside in Somerset using a lot of video, which is generally a good way to go. You're seeing lots of staff included, and a mention as well about seeing lots of staff included and named, which makes it very personal. Personality, really, really important, which is a really good piece of feedback. So thank you. So a few sort of key points really that I want to take out from your feedback. Thank you very much for having a good look through. Some really good feedback coming through there. Some of the key points, just to summarize: variety, making sure you are mixing up the way you deliver your content does matter. Video content will always go down really well, and you need to have a plan and a strategy for how you're going to utilize and create video content. Personality, so getting people across. So that might be the people within your organization, it might be the people your organization support, and authenticity as part of that. So real people, not, if you can avoid it, we want to get rid of stock imagery if we can. We want real people and something that's authentic. So variety, video content, personality. A few key things really to take out of that little section. And they are also all things that we will talk about a lot more as we go through this session this morning. But that's great. Thank you very much for entering into that and having a good look through. Hopefully it's given you a bit of inspiration. That's what I'm hoping for anyway. Okay, so I want to talk to you about stats and numbers and social media insights. I'm not going to go into loads of detail on numbers, but you are going to have 5 minutes just to have a little look through your stats. Every social media platform has its own inbuilt insights and analytics. Now, Facebook has something called Meta Business Suite, and from within there, you can see Facebook stats, but you can also see Instagram stats. Instagram has its own stats when you go into the app itself that you can see as well. And the likes of Twitter and LinkedIn have their own analytics available as well. Twitter's are a bit weak at the moment, but I think they're supposed to be getting better soon, but they are a bit weak at the moment. Now, you can use these numbers and stats however you want to. Some people use them for regular reporting. Some people use them as because they want to do detailed comparisons month by month or even year by year. My focus when it comes to stats and numbers on social media is that it should all gear around content primarily. You should be using your analytics and your insights to confirm which content works well and which content doesn't work quite so well. And that's really the main focus of it as far as I'm concerned. So just to give you an example of what everything looks like, this is Meta Business Suite. This is just one screenshot of it. So from here, you can see things like the amount of reach you've got on your Facebook page and your Instagram account. You can see who the audience is. You can also go through the different tabs and you can see things like what type of content is performing best, what your engagement levels are compared to the month before or the 90 days before, or however you want to go about it. Lots of detailed information is hidden within these stats there. And what it will tell you is a lot of information about which content is performing best. Now, if you want a sort of guide as to how you figure out which content is best, what metric do you use? The best one to use is engagement. And when I say engagement, I mean likes, comments, shares, link clicks. Anytime anyone has actually done something, that's when you know that someone is actually invested in that content. So don't necessarily worry about the number of people it's reached. Look at how much engagement your content is getting. And the content that's getting the most engagement is the best performing content. What you will find as part of that is that the more engagement it gets, the more people it reaches. So the two will come together anyway. But engagement really is your key measure. So this is what Meta looks like. This is what Instagram's insights look like, or a small snapshot of what they look like. And then you can see a bit more detail. You can go into a bit more granular by going through. Instagram's insights are much, much better than they used to be. They used to be really thin, but they're in a pretty good place now. and Twitter has something very similar as well. Now, what I want us to do, just for 5 minutes this time, rather than 10 minutes that we did before, is I want you guys just to have a little look. If you have access to it, I want you just to spend 5 minutes looking at your own insights and your own analytics of the page that you guys are managing. And I want you just to pick out, quite similar to what we just did with the case study activity, I want you just to try and pick out a couple of bullet points of things that are working well and a couple of bullet points of things that aren't working so well. So for a minute, that's all I'm sort of focused on. We don't need to go into loads of extra detail. What do you notice that's working well consistently? What do you notice isn't working well consistently? Now, if you don't have access to a page, please feel free to pick a page that might be one you're associated with and just scroll through and look at it anyway. And you're just looking for the posts that have got the most likes, comments, and shares, or any other type of engagement. So if you've got access to your stats, great, use them. If you haven't, just scroll through the page and see what you notice. But just like we did with the case study activity, I just want the stuff that's working really well for you, the stuff that's not working so well for you. And again, if you want to stick some of that feedback in the chat, then we can analyze that in 5 minutes or so. So just a few minutes, not loads of time, but have a quick look at those numbers, have a quick look at your pages, and feedback to me some of the things that you're noticing. Any questions? Please just let me know. There are some additional questions as well on the slides that you can use if you want to help sort of guide your activity. But as I say, main focus is just things that are working well, things that aren't working quite so well. Okay, so just a few more minutes. If you've spotted anything that's caught your eye, please let me know. So it might be that video content is doing really well compared to others. It might be that content that has more people in it is something that's going down particularly well. Anything that you notice at all, stick it in the chat and let me know. Yeah, some great feedback coming in, so thank you. We'll go for 2 more minutes, so till 22, and then I'll start working my way through it. Okay, so I think I'll stop you guys there. Thank you for those who have put some feedback in. If there's any more, please do fire away, and I'll spot it in just a second. But a lot of the points that you guys are making are points that I would absolutely expect. So it's really interesting to see that. And a lot of it builds on what we talked about with the things that you noticed from your case study activity. So good point here from Luke. So player highlights. So this is all to do with the basketball team. Player highlights and behind the scenes content always does well. However, any type of graphic post promoting games tends to perform poorly. Absolutely no surprise at all. Very much what I would expect. Personality, something that's authentic and shows real people, will always get more engagement than anything else. Now, those graphics that are promoting games, there's a couple of reasons why they don't tend to get loads of engagement. One is because although people are interested, they're still being advertised to, which means they sort of pull away from it slightly. But the other thing is there's not really anything for people to do when they see it. There's no reason for them to like it. There's no reason for them to comment on it or share it. They're still taking in the information, but that doesn't mean they're going to engage with it. So the first example, where you're showing people and something behind the scenes, is fantastic. Second example, where we're doing something promoting the game to graphic, is what we would call passive content, which is just content where you don't need to do anything when you see it. Now, that doesn't mean that sort of content doesn't need to be there, but it's always the type of content that's going to get a lesser response. So it's interesting you've noticed that. It's exactly what I would expect. So we've also got a comment, video content engagement much better than static posts. Video gives you movement. Movement catches your eye. It makes it more engaging. In some ways, it really is as simple as that when it comes to video content. And videos made from clips of actual events has the most likes. So again, we've got that authenticity coming through, something that's real rather than something that's overly curated. So Grace, videos and reels rapidly increase our engagement. Absolutely. So video again coming through. And an interesting point as well from Luke again, collabs have been massive for us recently. On Facebook and Instagram in particular, there's a relatively new feature that's been added in called collaborations. And basically what it allows you to do is when you share a piece of content, if you say that you're collaborating with someone, so you put their details in at that point, the post will also, if they accept it, the post will also go onto their account. And it's not the same as tagging them and they then share it onto their account. It actually goes out from their account as if it's their post, essentially. It's a great way of increasing the reach of any content that you're doing because it's going out from multiple sources. So definitely something to think about if you've got other organizations that you work in partnership with for certain things, get them involved, get those collaborations going. Videos and content featuring workers and our beneficiaries, most popular and have the most engagement. So again, lots of similar things that you guys are all noticing here. You're all different organizations with different audiences, but the patterns are clear and are all coming through. Video content goes down brilliantly. Content that has real people and authenticity goes down brilliantly. That's something that pretty much all of you, from what I can see here, are noticing, which is fantastic. And a point about reels on Instagram. So one reel has performed better than all the other stories and posts sort of put together really in the last 7 days. Reels on Instagram, we will talk about a little bit later. But in a nutshell, if you're using Instagram and you see that as a key part of your social media strategy, you must be doing reels and you must be doing them in detail and regularly. They are a fantastic way of reaching more people and a fantastic way of drawing in more engagement than you will do with your normal day-to-day content. Okay, so that's brilliant. Thank you very much for the feedback, everyone. Really appreciate it. And it's great to see that there are some patterns coming through for everybody. That process you've just gone through, I would recommend you do that once a month. Some people are really big on stats and numbers and things like that. I'm not one of those people. I'm better at writing than I am at doing anything with numbers. So for me, my focus is I don't care about the numbers themselves. The only thing I care about is learning from them. And if you go through this process every maybe 3 or 4 weeks or so, and you pick out 2 things you're going to do more of and 1 thing you're going to do less of, every month your social media presence is getting better. You're refining the quality of what you're doing. And it's all being done in a data-driven way, to use a lovely buzz phrase. So this process is something that is important and is worth doing regularly. Don't worry too much about the numbers themselves. Worry about what you can learn from them. That would be my advice. Okay. So let's scoot on. So we've had a really good discussion around what's working well for other businesses or organizations. And we've had another really good look as well at what specifically is working or perhaps not working quite so well for you. So hopefully you've got a few ideas in your mind now of the things that you might need to be sort of pushing on with in the future, things you might need to be doing more of, things you might want to be doing a little bit less of. And at this point, then it's the right time for us to start thinking about how you're actually going to deliver the content that you want to be sharing. Video being one really good example of this. So what we're going to do now, how are we doing for time? Yep, perfect. We've got a series of apps, some software, different ideas that we want to share with you that should help you and should give you the tools to try and put some content ideas together and to do some things differently to that which you're already doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through what they are, and in some cases I'm going to give you an example of exactly how they work so that you can feel comfortable and confident utilizing them yourselves in the future. But one of the biggest issues that we find with people with content sometimes is that they don't feel they have the tools to hand to be able to do these different things. So for example, we've talked a lot this morning about how video content always goes down particularly well. You might be sat there yourself thinking, well, that's great, but how am I going to create loads of video content? You know, it's just me. I've only got a phone. All of those sorts of questions that are completely reasonable things to be feeling and thinking. So hopefully by the time this little section is finished, you won't feel like that, and you'll feel like you've got everything you need to hand to get out there and create really interesting, really engaging social media content. So just a quick question that's come in before I move on. Some benefit of reels and videos. If you do need to promote events, at what point do you do that in between these types of reel videos and behind the scenes reels? Okay, so really good questions coming in here saying, basically you appreciate the importance of video and personalized content and things like that, but if you need to promote things, how do you integrate that alongside it? So it's a really good question. I will answer it in short now, but I will answer it in length later if that's okay. But basically the key is to have it all varied and make sure that, for example, you have some nice video content, then you have your promotional post, then you have some personality. Mix things up as much as you can. Don't get into the habit of everything being the same one after another. And that's the same for personality as well. We need variety. That's a really good place to start. The other thing is you can still use videos and reels and things like that to be promotional. You know, it doesn't have to be a graphic that you've created showcasing an event. It can be a video of someone talking through that event that you've edited to have the key details of when it is within that video itself, for example. So there are lots of different ways of going about it. I will come back to that in a lot of detail later on. So it's a really good question. In a nutshell, variety is the most important thing, and that will allow you to do everything essentially at the same time. But I will go into more detail on that later. So thank you for that question. Okay, so one of the key things I want to talk to you about is Canva, or one of the key pieces of software. Now, I am going to do a bit of a demo for you now as well on how to use this, for those of you who haven't come across it before, or even those of you who are using it. Canva is essentially a graphic design website that you can use to create your own graphics. You can use it to create video content as well. So it's got some brilliant video templates on there. You can also use it to create things like reels if you want to, if you're more comfortable doing it here than creating it on Instagram. It is very simple to use. It's a great way of making sure that you can do things like reinforce the brand. So have the same colors coming into everything, the same fonts, all of those sorts of things. It is probably the one piece of software I would recommend that everybody has. You know, if someone comes to me and says, I'm starting a company, I need an organization, I need social media to be a big part of it, and I need one piece of software to help me get started, what should it be? This is absolutely what it should be. So a couple of examples on screen is sort of using SASP again. Good example, particularly on the right-hand side, of a graphic that's been created that's in their colors, using their fonts, about a specific event. So we've got the date, the time, and details in terms of how to actually book on or how to get in touch. We've got an example on the left-hand side, which is a piece of feedback, you know, reviews, testimonials, feedback from people. Really good way of making sure, Canva is a really good way of making sure you can take that information that might be on your website or might be a Google review or something like that, but you can still use it on your social channels. Another sort of map design almost on the right-hand side here. So getting a lot of information across in a very short space of time just by using this one image. And we've also got an example on the left-hand side, which is a sort of real example, essentially, utilizing some of the templates that Canva has. So the one on the left is actually a video, but it's getting loads of information across. These two examples are interesting ones because the reason I've used them is because what they are both doing is they are getting lots of information across in the visual, in the graphic, or the video itself. So the post itself isn't necessarily going to be that long. All the information is here. That's definitely something to be considering. Now, our attention spans are disappearing by the day. And what we want to see is when we're watching a video, when we're looking at a photo or a graphic, we want to be able to take in that information there and then. And these two are sort of examples of that. So what I'm going to do for a second is I'm going to go into Canva and I'm going to do a little bit of a walkthrough, basically, of how it works and a couple of different examples of how to utilize it best. Now, for those of you that are already using Canva, hopefully I'll be able to give you a few new ideas. For those of you who are brand new to it, again, hopefully this will prove really useful. So bear with me just a second, just while I change the view on the screen. Chrome tab, there we go. Okay, so you should all be able to see our Canva account now. That's where I'm logged into. Now, one of the key things with Canva is that all the templates are already created for you. If you don't want to, you don't need to create anything from scratch, and everything is in exactly the right size. The layouts are all done. All you need to do is go in and add your own flourish to the templates that already exist. Now, you can see here some templates running across horizontally, some examples. I'm going to go with Instagram post towards the middle here, which is a perfect square. If in doubt, if you are creating content to go onto different places, if you've got any questions or doubts, perfectly square is the safest option. That tends to work pretty much everywhere. There are some variations on that, but that's a good sort of safe option to go for. So I'm going to click on that. It's going to open up a new screen for me. And from here, I will be able to see all the different templates that are available. So you can see in the middle here, we've got a nice big white square that I can now do whatever I want to do to it. Down the left-hand side here, you can see in this design tab, there's all the different templates that are available to me. And if I want to, I can use these and it will make my life considerably easier. So I'm just going to put an example. I'm going to search for something. Let's search for sport event. See what pops up. And then you can see some examples down the left-hand side here of the sort of templates which are available. I just realized, sorry, many apologies. I just realized that it's, you haven't been able to see that. You should be able to see it now. Yeah, great. There we go. So hopefully you guys can see the right tab now. Can you just give me a thumbs up if you can see that? Yeah, lovely. Got it. Fantastic. Okay. So, sorry, apologies for that. I was in the wrong tab. So from within here, you can see towards the left-hand side, all I've done is type in sport event, and it's giving me all these different templates that are available to me. Now let's pick one slightly at random. Let's choose this one. So if I want to, I can now utilize that template, and that can be the sort of basis of everything that I'm essentially doing. But I want to put my own flourish on this. I want to change the information. I might want to change the font. I might want to change the picture in the background. I have the ability to change everything. So I can use this template, but I can put my own stamp on it. So an example straight away, let's go with color. So let's say I don't want this green because green has nothing to do with my organization. So I'm clicking on that element, and then you can see towards the left-hand side here, there's a little box that has that color in. If I click on that, it then opens up my ability to add whatever color I want to this. So I can put my own color codes into it, or I can already have them saved so that I can utilize them whenever I want. So let's go with the pink instead. And I'm going to choose that pink. And then I just need to work through and change the green to the pink that I want associated with this. Now for this one, which is slightly faded out, and click on that. I'm not going to go pink, I'm going to go blue instead. The reason it's faded out is you can see here there's a transparency option running along the top here. And you can have something so it's completely filled, or you can have it slightly transparent, which is something that does work quite well. That's how that's done. So rather than green, I'm going to go with the light blue this time. And I'm going to do the same here. So I have total control at this point. And although this is a template that has essentially been created for me, I'm putting my own stamp on it and I'm making it match my brand or the brand of my organization. Now change all the writing that's in place. I can make it smaller, I can make it bigger, I can click on it. If I click on it, I can just move it all around if I want to. So it is literally essentially drag and drop graphic design. And a lot of the dragging and dropping has already been done for you if you want it to be. But let's say I want to change the font, so I'm going to click on that. Towards the top left-hand side again, we've got something that says Barlow at the moment, which is what that font is. But let's say I want something different. So I can use ones that I've uploaded into Canva if I want to, or I can just choose something. Entirely up to me, entirely up to us. And then I'll just make that a bit smaller so it goes back to that. There we go. So you can see how much control over all of these processes you have if you want it. The templates are fantastic. There's no reason generally for you to need to feel like you need to sort of create something completely from new yourself. The templates should do those jobs for you. Now this picture in the background currently of a bike, I've got a couple of options at this point if I want to change this. If I go into the uploads folder on the left-hand side, this is where I upload my own content. So my own photos and my own videos. So let's see if there's an example that would fit nicely into here, something I've done recently. I'm just going to use this example of some people sat chatting away. So if I want to use one of my own photos in this graphic instead, I just need to choose the option from the uploads, drag it in there, and it will replace the photo that's already there. And that's that. I can also do that with videos if I want to. So let's use a quick example. Just drag that in. And then the video content is coming there as well. So what that does for us immediately is if I want to, I can use these templates to create video content as well. So it's not just about graphics. It gives me the ability to create video content from Canva very easily and very quickly. Now, if you're promoting an event that's taking place, you can just create a graphic for it, but you could create a video graphic for it, which from what we've seen already from your stats is something that may work a little bit better. So that's a very quick run through using that Instagram, that perfectly square sort of Instagram template. As you can see down the left-hand side, when I go into designs, there are hundreds of templates that you can use. And one of the joys of Canva as well is while you use it, once I've done this and I'm happy with it, I'll download it, it goes into my download folder, and I can then use it wherever I want to. But it also saves, so I can also use it again in the future. So if I want to, I can just go back in, use exactly the same template, but just change the photo and change the date on it or something like that. And then I've got that reinforcement of my brand then, because all the photos that I'm using are of a similar style. They have the same colors, they have the same font. So I've got that real brand feel coming through. And that's something that Canva is really, really good for and does really help us with. So that's just one example of how to utilize it. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to sort of the home screen, if you like, show you some of the other templates. So you can see there's an Instagram story version towards the middle here. If I keep going, there's also an Instagram reel version. So I'm just going to show us that one because I want us to have a little look at that. Now this works in exactly the same way as the run through that we just did. So you're doing exactly the same thing, but you can see immediately that the template is a very different shape and a very different size. But also because we're doing video content, you can see there's a sort of, I don't know what you call it really, but like an area along the bottom here that's showing us the different elements to the video as we piece it together. Now, again, there are templates here if you want to use them. So let's do something like this one. You can see with this one, this has got 4 separate pages to it. So these are the good templates because they allow you to piece something together with multiple elements. But again, it's done all the work for you. So I'm going to do apply all 4 pages. And you can see how they line up along the bottom there. Now, along here, if I want to, I can make it so that one tab lasts longer or doesn't, or is in fact shorter. If I click in the middle of the two elements here, it gives me the ability to use or introduce transitions between them. So for those of you who've used Reels before, for those of you who use TikTok, these are all things that you can do on the platforms themselves as well. But Canva is a good way of doing the same thing. If you feel more comfortable using a computer doing some of these things than you do trying to do it from a phone, this is a great way of being able to do that. So if I just play it, it will show you what it looks like. It's a bit clunky. It shouldn't be quite that clunky, just a bit slow. But it shows you the sort of 4 different panels that Canva has created. They're all pieced together. It's done the transitions for you. It's added music to it. So just as we did with our previous example, all we need to do is change the colors on it, change the fonts, add our own photos in, and that template then becomes something really useful and really powerful for us. Apologies, it's frozen. Let's just refresh it a minute. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, hopefully you get the gist. Apologies, not sure why it's a bit slow, but hopefully you get the gist of the template that's been created there. So if you want to introduce more video content, Canva is potentially a really good place to get started with it. It has lots of its own stock video that you can use as well, but you do have that option of uploading your own information into there, which is something that definitely works. You can see uploads is what you're looking for. Videos. And then I can just drop my own video into there quite happily. Okay, so that's a bit of a run through of Canva. Hopefully will really help you if you've not used it much before. Good questions just come in regarding it. Does it give you the option to choose music? Yes, it does, absolutely. So let me just show you exactly where that is. So down the left-hand side, we've got these different areas we've seen. So we've looked at uploads. If you go into elements, this is where photos and videos are as well. So let's use basketball as an example. If I type that into there, you can see there's photos and there's videos and different options that I can add into there as well. But if you're looking specifically for music, you just need to keep scrolling down the left-hand side here, and you are looking for audio, which is about half the way down. And then there's a big list of music that's available to you that you can drop into anything that you create. So any video content that you create on Canva, you can add music to if you want to. Be aware, it's not, you're not going to get the Beatles on here. What it will be is the sort of stock music that you sometimes see used on Instagram and that sort of thing. But there's nothing wrong with that inherently. Let's see what that one's like. You get a lot of this sort of music, which, depending on the nature of what you're doing, might be absolutely perfect for what you're after. But it is there and available to you if you want it. If you're going to create video content on Canva that you're then going to use on Instagram, if you want to, you can leave the music out and then you can add it when you put it onto Instagram itself in the way that you would do normally. So the option is entirely there for you. And a good question following that up, does using trending music have an impact on reach? Yes, in short. In particular, if you're on TikTok, it makes a massive difference. If you're on Instagram, it does make a difference. It's all to do with algorithms. The more you use stuff that is being used widely by others, the better. And that counts for things like hashtags, locations as well, in particular music. So it may be that the best thing to do is not use the music within Canva, but to use the music that's trending on Instagram or TikTok when you upload it to there. Entirely up to you how you go about it. But in a nutshell, that is Canva. So I'm just going to come out of here a second and go back to this view. Okay. So Canva is just one piece of software. There are lots of others that I'm going to talk you through as well, but I wanted to give you a good run through of exactly what it is and how it works so that hopefully you feel comfortable using it in the future. It's fantastic for creating graphics. It's fantastic for resizing images if you need to do so to make sure that they sort of fit perfectly. And it is very good for video content. If video content is something you feel like you struggle with, which is totally valid because it is more complicated and more difficult to create than static content. Canva is one really good way of making sure that you are able to produce it quickly and easily. Now, Canva is free. but there is a paid version, which I think is about £80 a year. We use the paid version, but a lot of what I just showed you, you can do for free. It is also free for certain types of organizations, so for charities and CICs and things like that. So if it's something that you're not using at the moment, it is definitely worth investigating. I probably use Canva for about 80, probably even 90% of the content I create. For our clients, I probably use Canva one way or another, whether that's to make something that's really detailed and a bit complex, or whether it's just to resize an image perfectly. I use it for almost everything that I have. So it's a fantastic piece of kit, highly recommended. Okay, so when we come back in a second, so we're going to have a quick break. I've talked to you about Canva, and then after the break, I'm going to introduce you to some of the other apps and the other bits of software that we use and talk you through why they might be useful to you. And then we're basically just going to barrel into top tips, key information, key content themes, all of those fun bits as well. So if you have any questions during the course of the break, please feel free to put them in the chat, and then when I come back, we'll address them. But if everyone's happy, we'll just have 5 minutes because it's only a couple of hours the session. So I've got 11:06 by my clock, so we'll come back at 11:11 if that's okay, and we'll get going again. Any questions during the chat, please just stick them in there and I'll address them when I get back. Okay, see you shortly. Okay, so I'll just give everyone 30 seconds to come back and then we'll get going again. Good couple of questions coming over the break, so thank you for those. I'll go through them in just a second as well. Okay, so I'm just going to go through these questions that have come in, and that will just give everyone another minute to come back as well, anyone who's not yet back. So some good questions. So are phone cameras high enough quality for content creation, particularly for video? As long as your phone is relatively new, so year old, maybe probably a good limit on that. Yes, absolutely. You know, my phone is probably about a year old. It might be a bit older actually. And I can do 4K video from my phone if I want to, which is pretty high quality. It's not far off the sort of quality you get from some fairly beefy, expensive cameras. So absolutely it is. It's important as well to bear in mind. A good example of what I'm about to say I can give. So we've got a client that's a housing developer down here in the Southwest, and they paid to have some really high quality video footage done, to do sort of drone footage going over their construction sites and all of that sort of stuff. And it was brilliant, fantastic video, but very expensive, cost a lot of money. They gave it over to us and we shared it across the platforms and did what we do with it. And it did well, but it only went so far. I think it was about a week later, it was somebody's birthday in the office, and somebody sent us a video of cake and singing in the office and stuff like that, and we used that, and that post got a lot more engagement than the highly curated video they sent across the week before. Now, the point I'm getting to really is that the quality of video and photos and things like that is not the only thing that matters. And actually, what it would be a real shame if you were put off doing and creating your own video content because you were concerned that it's not necessarily sort of 5K UHD quality. Most modern phones that are a year or maybe 2 years old, absolutely the video content that you can create with them is definitely good enough. And you know, that should hopefully give you the confidence to say, right, well, actually we can create our own video content very quickly and very easily from our own phones. Another question came as well, do you need to have the paid version of Canva to use the features that I was just showing? No, the features that I was just showing are all available on the free version of Canva, but a lot of the stock video and things like that and the stock photos is quite severely reduced. So you would need a bit more of your own photos and videos, which ideally is what you want to use anyway. The free version is pretty much exactly the same. There's just fewer of everything. So there are fewer templates, fewer stock photos, fewer stock videos, all of those things, a bit less music to play with. But you can, in essence, do the same things, just you don't have as much choice in how you go about it. That's pretty much how it works. Okay, so let's change the view on the screen. So for the second half of the session today, you guys have done quite a lot of the work yourselves. So you've been looking at other organizations, you've been looking at yourselves and seeing which things have been working well, which things haven't been working quite so well. And we've introduced our sort of first piece of software and done a bit of a run through of exactly how it works. Second half of the session, we're going to be talking a little bit more about different software and different apps that we use and talking you through why those are useful. And then we're going to go into quite a lot of theory is the wrong word, but a lot of detail about things like the best time of day to post, the length of the posting you should be doing, and also our formula to help you make sure that you are varying the content that you're using. So a lot to cram in the next 45 minutes. So next piece of software is Boomerang. This is building on the idea of creating video content from your phone. A lot of the apps and so on that I'm about to share with you are built around that theme. So video is something that's come up a lot today, and I want us to go into a bit of detail now on how we can create it easily. Canva is a really good way of creating video content, especially because it has stock video that you can use if you need to. However, if you want to create your own video content, building on the question that we had from Alice, your phones, as long as it's a decent quality one, are absolutely good enough to help you create video content. Boomerang is one example of this, and one way that you can use a very simple, completely free app to help you create engaging video content. So a couple of quick examples on here. Boomerang videos, all they do in essence is they allow you to create content which is just sort of short repeating videos. Now, especially if you're an organization that is sort of geared around sport, you will always have movement involved in what you're doing when you're doing sessions or anything along those lines. When you have movement, Boomerang works well. So it's a completely free app for your phone. You can have it on a tablet as well, that allows you just to create these very short snippets and videos. It's particularly good if you're regularly thinking about using Reels, where you are piecing together maybe 5 or 6 different types of video. If within that you have a couple of boomerangs thrown in there, that's something that can really make it more interesting. You can see by looking through, just by watching these examples on screen here, how it's immediately more interesting than a static photo would have been. It's catching your eye. There's something slightly different, funky going on, and it does just draw you in that way. More importantly, in some ways, from the algorithm's point of view, and it doesn't matter which platform that is, this sort of content registers as video content and therefore will immediately be given precedence over lots of other things. So this will have taken 2 or 3 seconds to do, cost nothing, and just been done on your phone. But immediately this sort of content is going to be put above other types of content that aren't using it. So it's a really good, quick and easy way of creating some video from your phone. This is an app called PhotoGrid, which allows you to do something very similar. Those of you who use Layout or other types of app like that for Instagram, which allow you to create collages, PhotoGrid allows you to do the same thing, but it allows you to do it with video content. So this is just one post. This is just one visual, but it's made up of 4 panels, all of which are videos. So again, you come back to and you see something like this and you think, gosh, that is so much more interesting and engaging than just 4 static photos would be, or even one video would be. There's lots going on here. So PhotoGrid is a really good one, and in particular, I think it works really well for events and things like that, or a session that's taking place where you want to showcase multiple elements. Now, of course, you can use Reels to do something quite similar, but we're always looking to mix things up. We're always looking for variety. And PhotoGrid is another free app for your phone that allows us just to mix things up and to vary what we're doing. You're not going to use all of these options all of the time, but having them all to hand and having them available makes it much easier for you to come up with different ideas and makes it much easier for you to vary things. Time-lapse video, which you can see on screen as we speak. Fantastic way of creating interesting and engaging video content with almost no effort on your part. So time-lapse video, sometimes called hyperlapse as well. These again are something that we can all do from our phones for free. So within the settings of the camera of your phone, you will have either time-lapse or hyperlapse. The joy of it is whatever it is you've got taking place. So let's say you've got a session that you're running, which is an hour long. You grab your phone, you stick it on a tripod, or you wedge it up with a couple of books or whatever you want to do, get it set up, you use the time-lapse option, you hit go, you run off and do your thing. You go and deliver your session, you go and do whatever it is you're doing. You forget about your phone. It's doing the job for you. You don't need to worry about it. When you've finished, you come back, you hit stop, and all the time you've been doing your normal job, it's created this brilliant resource for you and this fantastic piece of video. Now, time-lapse video is something that does draw in people and does get engagement because it's quite different. It's something you don't see every day, and it's something that people do find interesting. So it's definitely something that I would be recommending you jump on. Very quick, very easy to do, and it takes almost no time to get it done. So time-lapse is a fantastic one, especially if you are in the habit of doing things like running sessions or running events. Time-lapse is fantastic. Building on time-lapse, there is the next option, which is the polar opposite, which is slow motion. And again, if you are an organization that has the sport related in particular, but does anything that includes movement within what it is you offer, slow motion can work really well. It is harder generally to come up with ideas for slow motion than it is for time lapse. But if you've got movement taking place, it can work. Just like with time lapse, it is free. You can do it from your phone. It will be within the settings of your phone. The slow motion option will be there. And again, it's just something different. As we talked about in the first half of the session, variety is really important. We're really looking hard at ways of doing things differently, especially when it comes to video content. Slow motion is a fantastic way of doing this. And again, it's just free and hidden within the settings of your phone. Okay, now I just want to mention this app. This is an app called InShot. And if you are someone who prefers working from your phone than you do working from elsewhere, InShot is a really good one, a really good app to have access to. It basically allows you to do video editing, so things like resizing, piecing together different videos, changing things like brightness, muting certain parts of video, all of that sort of stuff. InShot is an app that allows you to do that, and you can use it from your phone. You can also use Canva to do that if you want to, or to do something similar. And of course, if you're doing Reels, you can use a lot of features within there. But if you are someone who prefers to work from a phone and likes to do all your editing and so on from there, InShot is the best app to use to do that. Okay, just go back to presentation a second. One last app that I do really quite enjoy, in particular if you are using Instagram regularly, this is a really good one. So one of the things that you can do on Instagram is you can do swipeable posts, which is essentially where you add multiple photos at once. So you can add up to 10 photos at a time and people can then swipe through to see them all. One thing that we're seeing people doing more and more of as time goes on is rather than just having 10 independent photos of the same thing, what people are doing is they will take a panoramic photo of somewhere. So let's use basketball as an example, because that's come up today. Let's say you do a panoramic photo of the whole court taking place, so from one end to another with everything in between. What you can use panorama crop to do then is to cut that photo into maybe 4 individual squares. And then when people swipe through, rather than seeing 4 different things, they are seeing one photo that's joined together, and they are getting like a 3D effect of it. Something that's really cool and can work really, really well. And again, especially if you've got a good example of where to use it, sports being a really good one, it's something that works really well. Swipeable posts on Instagram often are right up there with video in terms of the amount of engagement they get. And it's because they are immediately more engaging. People have to swipe through and engage with it if they want to see the whole story. So Panorama Crop is just another free app that you can have for your phone. If you've got the ability to do panoramic photos from your phone, which we all do, and you've got the right situation to do it, this is a really good way of using those photos and doing something again that's just different and a bit more interesting. So those are the different apps and the different bits of software that I wanted to recommend and talk through this morning. They all offer something slightly different. You're not going to use them all every day. You're not going to be using them every sort of second. But what they give you the ability to do is to do different things most days. You know, you're not going to be doing a time-lapse video every day or a slow motion every week. But having the ability to do them means that when you're walking around, when you're doing events, when you're running sessions, when you're doing things, instead of thinking, oh, I'll grab a photo of that, you might spot something out the corner of your eye and think, God, that would work really well as a slow-mo. Or, oh, maybe I should set the phone up and do a time-lapse of that 10-minute session that's taking place. The more tools that you have to hand, the easier it is to get creative and the easier it is to vary what you're doing. So hopefully those different tools together, in particular with Canva, will give you the confidence to say, actually, we can do different things. We can introduce some variety, and we can introduce, in particular, some video content. So hopefully you sort of feel a bit more confident in that sense now. Okay, so those are the different apps and the different tools and different bits and pieces. We now need to get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty, and I want to talk to you about live video as well, specifically. Now, this isn't a separate app or software or anything like that, but it is something slightly different, and it does build on the fact that we've already been talking about video and how important that is. Video content is important, and it does make a big difference. However, there is another side to video content, which is the ability to do it live. Now, live video is something quite different, and it does allow you to access people and access your audience in a way that you wouldn't with a pre-recorded video. So the best way to explain this is to give a practical example. I'm just going to have a quick sip before I do. So let's say, let's use myself as an example. Let's say I'm going to do a video which is 5 top tips for Instagram Reels. if I do that as a pre-recorded video, let's say it's 5 minutes long, that's absolutely worthwhile and good quality content. However, when my audience see that, all they can really do is take it in. They'll watch it and they'll say, okay, don't forget to put trending music in. And they'll go, oh, that's a good point. Or, there isn't really much scope for them to engage with us while the video is taking place. So it's good content, but it would probably be classed as passive content as well. So we need to look at a different way of doing it for some examples, and live video is something that's very different. Now, if I do that same video, but I do it live, when I get to point 3, which is don't forget to use trending music, someone who's watching that might think, oh, I didn't even know how you could add music. How do you get to that? They comment on the video saying, how do you access music on Instagram Reels? Because it's live, I see that question come in and I can then answer it, and I am then engaging with my audience live through the video. So live video is automatically more engaging than pre-recorded video. Every time somebody asks a question, it's an engagement, which means more new people will then start to see the video as well. So live video, in terms of content, in terms of the sort of content that all of the social media platforms want you doing, live video ticks every box. Okay, so it's video, it's engaging, it's interactive, you're drawing your audience in. It ticks every single box, and it's a great way of doing something different and varying what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Now, you're not going to be doing live video every day or even every week. I'm not expecting that. If you were doing live video once every 4 weeks, that would be a really good place to be in, if you could be. The reason is because, as well, it's not just about the video at the time, it's about the knock-on impact it has. So as a good general rule of social media activity, if you do what the platforms want you to, they reward you by showing your content to more people. One of the things the platforms want you doing is live video, Facebook being by far the biggest example of this. So if you do a live video on Facebook, what you will find is the posts that you do afterwards, maybe for the next week or so, will perform better than perhaps they would have done already, purely because you've done that live video. It's all about creating momentum, and live video is a great way of doing that. Really good question from Sarah. What if nobody watches or interacts? I've been there, it can happen. A couple of things to think about with live videos. So make sure people know it's coming. Don't just go live, post about it, do some promotion for it. Say next Wednesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we are going live and we are talking about this initiative or this whatever. So make sure people know that it's coming. That's a really good place to start. The other thing to bear in mind with it is it's always worth having some people planted, if you like, to ask questions. So if you're doing one, make sure somebody in the office is watching from a different computer, and they can then ask some questions if they need to, if it does go a little bit quiet. Because the longer the video goes on for, the more questions you will get, but nobody ever wants to ask the first question. So sometimes you need someone ready to do that. The other thing is to make sure that you have information ready. So for example, we've done them before, we do Q&As through Facebook Live. We've done that quite a lot over the years. When we start, nobody is watching, because obviously it takes a couple of minutes for the video to get cranked up and for people to come across and start watching it. So I will normally start with maybe 3 things that I've noticed that week. And over the course of time, while I'm talking through that the first thing that does is allows the audience to build. Second thing it does is it plants ideas in people's minds. They see it and they think, oh, actually, that's a good point. I've got a question on that. So make sure you've got some of your own information prepared. In terms of the best time of day to do it, it will depend on who your audience is and when they are online. And that's something that you can see if you go into the insights on Facebook and Instagram in particular. Probably outside of work hours is going to work best, depending on who your audience is. But that's not necessarily always going to be the case. And obviously outside work hours may not always be possible, depending on the nature of what it is that you're doing. So you'll have to look at your own audience and see when they are online and when will work best. But good questions. So a couple of extra bits of advice for live video. It works brilliantly on Facebook in particular, and Instagram is also somewhere where you do see plenty of it. Twitter, I wouldn't worry about doing it there. LinkedIn is somewhere where it can work really well too. But it's not something to be scared of. It is something that can be extremely powerful. And in particular, it's great for things like Q&As. You can do interviews with people. So it might be an interview with a parent of someone you've supported or arranged a session for or something like that. It's a great way if you've got something new that's launching, using the sort of live video ability means that when you're launching that, if people have got questions, if they want to know more about it, you can have that interaction. So live video is brilliant. The only issue with it is that everyone's terrified of it. You don't need to be. It is simple to do, and it is something that can work really well. If you don't want to do it yourself, find someone in the office who's up for it and pin them down and get them to do it. But it is something that can be really, really powerful. Okay. Building on the idea of live video as something which is a little bit different and you're perhaps not going to be doing on a day-to-day basis, but is something that should be introduced. There are some other extra elements just to bear in mind, depending on which platforms you're using on a day-to-day basis. So things like polls, for example. So when I say polls, I mean on Instagram. So you're looking for things like within Instagram stories, there are 2 different poll options that you can utilize. So asking people a yes or no question, or you have like the slide rule thing you can do. Polls are brilliant because they draw people in. You're sort of making them engage with you. And you can do polls on Twitter, you can do them on LinkedIn as well. So polls are a great example of if you use Instagram stories a lot, make sure you are doing polls because they do get engagement. One positive element to LinkedIn, I suspect LinkedIn is a platform that you don't use quite as much as some of the others potentially. One of the cool things you can do on LinkedIn that you can't do on the others is you can upload documents as the visual element of your post. You can also upload things like PowerPoint presentations. That's the only platform where you can do that. So if you've got, for example, reports that you produce that might be a 20-page PDF or something similar, you can put that on LinkedIn and then it becomes the visual element. And that's something that can work really, really well. Just before I move on, good question from Alice about live videos. Do they then exist on the page after you finish that live video? Yes, if you choose for them to. So whenever you finish a live video, you have a choice to post it to your page, and it means it's always there and it goes on essentially like a normal video would, or to delete it and then it's gone. So it's entirely in your control. Unless there's any reason that you want to delete it, I would always suggest you post it to your page and keep it. And what you'll find is actually it will continue to get views in the days and even the weeks afterwards as well. So that would be my advice in that sense. Stories, we've mentioned a couple of times. If you use Instagram, you must be doing Instagram stories. They are a slightly different type of content to your normal day-to-day content, but they are extremely important. A couple of examples of Instagram stories just on the screen here. They're brilliant for driving website traffic. They're brilliant for showing that behind the scenes side of things as well, because you can quite easily share content to your Instagram stories. And it doesn't have to be your best content. It can be a quick photo that you've done while you're out and about. It can be something a little bit different and a bit more personable. Swipeable posts I've mentioned. So if you're using Instagram, uploading multiple photos and having that ability to swipe through them, that does tend to get a lot of engagement. So worth considering. And you can also do things where you can do 3D photography on Facebook. Like Facebook will do that for you. Again, all we're looking at with these things is ways of doing something that's slightly different, ways of introducing variety all the time. Last point on there is Reels, which again, we have discussed a little bit as we've gone through. Reels are huge on Instagram. It's the concept that they stole from TikTok of this sort of highly edited video that you create yourself. If you are using Instagram, you must be doing Reels. The more Reels you do on Instagram, the more new people you reach. It's that simple. Okay, so how are we doing for time? Perfect. We've talked quite a lot about some of the different apps, software features that are available to you. We've done quite a lot of analysis on what works and what doesn't work quite so well. Now it's a case of bringing that all together and trying to put a bit of a strategy into place. Before I move on to that, just good quick questions coming from Luke. So regarding stories on Instagram, is location tagging worthwhile? And if so, how does it affect our output? When you're doing your grid posts or you're doing Reels, location is very important, definitely worth doing. Less so with stories. Now, I wouldn't say it's not worth doing, but it's definitely not as powerful as it is for the other type of posting that you're doing on Instagram. In theory, when you add your location to an Instagram story, it adds your story to other stories of that location. And therefore, it makes it easier for people who don't follow you to find your stories. In reality, how useful that is and how well that actually works is another question. So I would do it in specific examples, but I wouldn't necessarily do it for every story that I do, whereas I would do it for pretty much every grid post that I do or every reel that I do. So not such a big deal in stories, but definitely on the other side of things. So that's that. Good question. Okay, so we've got some key stats and some key themes and some key ideas that we need to bear in mind when we are putting a content strategy together. So some of these stats are going to really well illustrate some of the points that we've made as we've gone through today. And this first one is a really important one that shows how people want to take in their social media content. So 80% of people or social media users would rather watch a live video than click through and read a blog. Now, that's not me just sort of pushing the idea of live video on you. The key thing to bear in mind with that stat is that it is showing you how people want to absorb content on social media now. They don't really want to read anything. They don't want to click through and find out more information. They want all the information they need there and then. That's one reason why video is so powerful and so useful, because you can get across a lot of information in video content. It's not always easy to do that when you're using photos or graphics. So yes, live video is powerful. That's one thing that's saying, but the key thing that's telling you is that people want to be able to look at their phone, see a post, and understand and learn everything they need to in that moment without having to go and find out lots of other information. A good one as well, if you are going to be using video regularly, 85% of all non-live video is watched with the sound off. So if you are going to be creating lots of video content, in particular if you're going to have people talking to the camera, you will need subtitles on there. Otherwise, people will disengage from it. User-generated content is something we want to try and promote as much as possible. Now, user-generated content just means clients, customers, people you support, in essence, people who engage with you. And really, that's just because it's all well and good you guys saying how good you are at what you do. But if you can have other people saying that on your behalf, that is immeasurably more powerful. And then that last bullet point is the one I really want us to focus on here. I'm just going to skip through to there. 40% more engagement on posts that have faces within the visual. Now, that's no surprise. That shouldn't be a big surprise to most of us based on the conversations that we've had as we've gone through today. When we looked at the case studies right at the start, when you looked at your own stats, one of the key things that came up was the difference it makes when something is authentic and when you have personality within it. That stat just perfectly illustrates that and brings that all together. 40% more engagement is a huge number. It makes, you know, it's nearly half. It's a huge difference. So we need faces, we need authenticity in things. The more of that we have, the more engagement we will get. The more engagement we get on everything, the more people we reach. If you don't get that engagement, you don't reach people. So that shows you just how important that is. Good question coming in. So how do you set up subtitles on live feeds? So it depends which platform you're using. If you're using Facebook, you need to use something called Live Producer, which is a piece of software within Facebook, which basically just helps you do your live video in a more efficient way. And you can sort out subtitles from there. From Instagram, it should be, when you're setting up your live video, it should be that there is an option within there to have it captioned, essentially, or to have subtitles added to it at the time. It can be a bit hit and miss when you're doing live videos, and you don't necessarily need subtitles when you're doing live video, because live video is often done for a different reason. People want to listen to it because it's a Q&A about a specific initiative or something like that. When you're doing it with normal video, which isn't live, when you upload your video to Facebook, it will ask you if you want to add subtitles to it, so you can choose it there. When you do it on Instagram, when you put a video into a story or into a reel, The square smiley face option that's at the top of the screen, if you click on that, subtitles or captions as they call them, is one of the options that's in there, and you just have to click on captions and it will create them for you. So it does depend where you are and what you're using. Okay. Now, this is always an interesting thing to look at. This is the recommended length of post for each of the sort of 4 key social media platforms that we're referencing. Now, what this is telling us, so Instagram, 125 characters. That's pretty much in line with the previous Twitter limit that we used to have that you were able to tweet, which was very, very short. You can see why it's at that level. So what that means is that's the longest post that you can do, where people then don't have to click see more if they want to read the rest of it. Likewise, LinkedIn the same, 140 characters keeps it into that under that see more idea. The one that should really catch your eye on here is Facebook in the bottom right hand corner. So if you can do a post on Facebook that has 40 characters or fewer, you can get 86% more engagement on that content. 40 characters is not even really a sentence. It's exceptionally short. So a character, of course, is every letter in space, so it's not words. 40 characters is very, very short posting. Now, what I would say about this screen and what we're seeing on here is it's not so much a case of aiming for what this is showing you. There is just a general theme that you should be picking up on from what we can see there, which is that the shorter your posts are, the more engagement they get. That's the key thing today. It doesn't matter which platform you're looking at. Keep your posts and keep the copy and the writing as short and as minimal as possible. People don't want to read anything, basically. So if there is information that they need to see, guide them through to somewhere else, or put it in the graphic, or put it in the video instead, because people generally won't read it. If you do need to have a fair amount of writing in there, think about making sure that it's nicely spaced out. Make sure that you've got emojis in there as a way of breaking it up. What we don't want is a big block of black and white text. So you do need to get creative around that. And the shorter, the better, always. If that means you have to use the visuals to get that information across, that is a better way of doing it. And if you can come up with posts that are 40 characters or fewer, you will get a lot more engagement. But I can promise you that's hard work. You're not going to do that very often. However, when you can do it, see what happens, see what response it gets. Another question that we're asked a lot, optimum time of day for posting on the different social media platforms. Now, this is something that actually has changed in the last year or two. It was all quite similar at one point, but it has changed. So Facebook, the optimum time for posting now on Facebook is actually the middle of the day. So historically, it would have been either first thing in the morning or later in the evening. What we're seeing now, this is actually something that changed during COVID and has stayed the same. Middle of the day is your best time to be posting on Facebook. If not that, then ideally first thing in the morning. Posting on Facebook in the evenings is not necessarily worth doing. Instagram is much more how Facebook used to be. So we're looking at very first thing in the morning or later in the evening. And actually on Instagram, sometimes you can get away with doing things quite late in the evening, 7, 8 o'clock even. Those are your peak times when people aren't working. Now that's different for Facebook because the algorithms on Facebook are much stronger. So the time of day is different as a result. Twitter, again, like Instagram or X, I need to call it, first thing in the morning, later in the evening. LinkedIn, if you do use LinkedIn, is very much a 9 to 5 business platform. Late morning into early afternoon tends to work best. Now, scheduling is something that you can use to help you make sure that you are posting at these prime times if you want to. If you want to schedule onto Facebook and Instagram, we recommend using Meta Business Suite. If you want to schedule on Twitter, you can use Twitter itself. They do also have TweetDeck, although that has changed recently and become less useful. LinkedIn, you can schedule from within LinkedIn. TikTok, you can schedule on from a computer as well if you want to do so. Now, the time of day, it is useful trying to post at those peak times of day. However, you do, just like with the rest of your content, you do still want to vary things. You do still want to mix things up. So don't post at exactly the same time every day. but you can have a specific time of day that you use more often than not, and that's absolutely fine. Okay, so a few content themes that I want us to bear in mind, building on this. Giving something back to your audience is really important. And essentially what that means is give your audience a reason for following you that isn't just about buying from you or working with you or using you. This comes back to the point we made about innocent smoothies earlier on. So you guys had a good look at what they were doing, and you said one of the key things they don't do is talk about their products, but they are still giving you value. They are still giving you a reason for following them and engaging with them, despite the fact that they're not talking about your products. That's something that we can all learn from, and we can all try and think about how can we introduce that into what we're doing. If I use myself as an example, a really obvious thing that I can be doing is just sharing information about what changes in social media. So the second something happens, I can post from my page. Did you know you can now do this with Instagram Reels? Go and give it a go. That means that people can follow us, not necessarily because they want training or management, but just to stay up to date with what's going on. So we're giving them a reason to engage with us. That's something that we can all think about. And it is important because people don't want to go to social media channels to be sold to. So we need to give them another reason to engage with us. Most of the content that you share on your social media platforms can be used in multiple places at the same time. So let's say you create a great graphic, you put it on Facebook. That can also go on Instagram. It can also go on LinkedIn. It can also go on Twitter. In the past, people would have been worried about that, and they would have had this sense of, yes, but what if the same person sees my post in 4 places at once? It simply doesn't happen anymore. Okay, the algorithms are so strong, and there's so much going on in that sense, that you don't need to worry about the idea of badgering people or people seeing your posts in multiple places. However, if you are going to use the same content on different platforms, it must be tweaked and it must be tailored for those platforms specifically. That's really, really important to bear in mind. And what I mean by that is, for example, on Instagram, you would use a lot of hashtags. On Facebook, you don't. So although the post can be the same, it has to be tweaked to suit that platform. Another good example would be on Instagram, website links aren't clickable. So on Instagram, when you do a post, you might say something like, click the link in our bio to find out more. Whereas on Facebook, you would have the website link there ready for people to click. So things will be different on different platforms, and you need to make sure that you cater for that. It's really important. Video, we've talked about a lot, including keywords, phrases, and hashtags. You want to make sure that your content is searchable for people. Whichever platform you're using, whatever type of content you're sharing, you want to make sure that people can find it who don't follow you. And there are lots of different ways of going about that. Hashtags are a really obvious one. So if you're using Instagram or Twitter in particular, you must have hashtags in the posts that you're sharing. Hashtags make it easy for people who don't currently follow you to find you. So make sure you're thinking about things like using hashtags when relevant. And in particular on Instagram, on Twitter, that's where they're very important. Showcase the people behind the organization is something we've talked about a lot today. The more people you have in your content, the more engagement you get. The more engagement you get, the more people you reach. People like to buy from people. Don't forget that when you're putting your content together. And consistency is a key element as well, which is something we haven't actually mentioned yet. One of the other key questions alongside how time of day of posting is how often you should be posting. And I suspect it's a question that one of you was going to ask me at some point as we got through. There isn't a sort of magic answer to that, because it will depend on which platforms you're using, and it depends on yourself, how much time you have and how much content you have available to you. The gold standard would be to have something going on every day on all platforms. That's not always possible for everybody for completely valid reasons. So the most important word to bear in mind is consistency. What we need to avoid at all times are big gaps in our content. So it might be, for example, that you have the capability of doing 3 posts a week. If that's the case, the most important thing is that they are evenly spaced out. So you don't want, for example, to do 2 posts on a Monday and 1 on a Tuesday, and then nothing until the following Monday. If you're going to do 3 posts a week, you want to go Monday, Wednesday, Sunday, Saturday, whatever. And if you've got that consistent stream of content, that's what matters most. Social media has changed in the sense that we are very much in the realms of quality over quantity when it comes to content now, which wasn't the case a few years ago. You used to be able to get away with posting as often as you wanted. Didn't matter if the content was any good, it could be a bit rubbish, and it really didn't matter. That is not the case anymore. If your content is not up to scratch, you potentially do harm by posting it. And therefore, you're better off doing 3 really good posts a week than 5 or 6 average ones. So do bear that in mind. Consistency is the key word. Good questions coming from Sarah. So how do you know which hashtags to use and which to avoid? It is a bit of a manual process, unfortunately, coming up with hashtags. The best thing to do, if we use Instagram as an example, if you want to know which hashtags are best to use, go into the search function, search for that hashtag, and see what comes up. See how often it's being used. See what kind of content is associated with it. The more a hashtag is being used, the more useful it is generally. But you also want them to be niche. So, for example, let's use sport as an example. There's no point using hashtag sport because that will be far too big, and that won't necessarily be useful to you. However, using hashtag sport Berkshire or Berkshire Sport or something like that would be more useful because that's immediately a lot more niche and a lot more focused. So it is a bit of a manual process, but you just need to spend the time going through and finding that. Also looking at what hashtags are being used by other accounts that have a similar audience to you. That can be a good way of figuring that out as well. But find a batch, use them repeatedly for a while, see if they're being successful or not. And then if not, you can go in and tweak. But it will take a bit of effort up front. But once you've done that and you found them, you then don't need to worry too much. Okay. And then the last thing really that I want to talk to you about is sharing with you our formula for coming up with a nice, varied and balanced content strategy. So we've talked a huge amount about variety today, about making sure that you are doing things and doing your posting in different ways. So sometimes doing videos, sometimes doing swipeable posts, doing reels, using photos, using graphics. The more varied your content is, the more engaging it will be. That's also true for what you're actually talking about. And we've got this formula here that's on screen that we use to try and make sure that not just the way you deliver your content, but also what you're actually saying is also varied. And this comes back to a question we had earlier on. I said I would talk about it a bit more at the end. This is where this comes in. So this formula that we call the rule of thirds, what it allows you to do is break your content up into roughly 3 different sections. Okay, so the first of which is business news and promotion. This is the easy one. This is where you talk about the initiatives that you have running, the events you have coming up, testimonials that you've had back recently, good feedback. This is the sort of stuff that you're probably already doing regularly. And it's the slightly easier amount of content. It does need to be there, but that type of content will always be the one that gets the least amount of engagement. Second third on here, we call sort of industry news and local news. This is often a share from another source, but this is basically means anything that your audience would find interesting but isn't about you. So it might be that you see an interesting story on BBC News that you know your audience would find interesting. So you share it onto your Facebook page. It might be that there's a brilliant story from a local charity about something they've got going on and you share it onto your page, or you create your own post using that information. That is absolutely valid to do. And any content that is relevant and interesting to your audience doesn't always have to be about you. Comes back to that idea of providing value. The last third on here is behind the scenes, personality, authenticity, all of those things that we've talked about today about getting people across and showing the social side of what you're doing. Social media is social by definition. People want to see people. And that's what that last third is all about. It's not personal content. It's content that shows people and shows authenticity. Now, this last third is where you get all of your engagement, pretty much. Your likes, your comments, your shares, all of that sort of stuff, all comes in that last third. And although you might look at that, you might think, well, that's great, but really I want to get some engagement on my promotional content. If you don't introduce personality and behind the scenes content, you don't get enough engagement for anybody to actually see your promotional messages. So that's why the variety is so important. If all you do is promote in the hope that the more I promote, the more people will see those key messages, what will actually happen is the opposite, because you'll get less engagement, and therefore, as a result, fewer people will see your promotional messages. So that's why this variety is so important. The more you mix it up and the more personality you introduce, the more people will see your promotional messages. Now, you can, of course, combine some of these things together as well, which brings us back to things like live video. So if you've got a new initiative that you're launching, if you do a live video talking it through where you take questions, that is promotional, but it is also falls into that behind the scenes personality vent as well, because there's a real person on screen delivering this information. So you can combine these as well. But the important thing, really, the most important thing to take from this is that the more you mix things up, the better, not just in how you deliver the content, but also with what you're saying. If you have to prioritize something, you should prioritize behind the scenes and personalized content, because that's where you get your engagement, and therefore that will really help you get those key messages out there. Okay, so that rule of thirds side of things, I've got a few examples of what goes into each of these sections, which you'll be able to look at once I send this over to you. Key starting point for a content strategy: look in the diary. Sounds like a really obvious thing to say and a really obvious point to make, but look at what you as an organization are doing day to day and what you've got coming up, and that should give you a lot of your content ideas, because what we want to see is what you guys are actually up to, what's going on the ground, what sessions are taking place, and therefore by the time you've looked in the diary, that will give you a lot of the content you're after. In terms of the industry and local news, you can also include within that things like trending stories, so stuff that's in the news, and also things like national days and national weeks, national months and things like that as well. Behind the scenes, the most important element. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that anything you do is not going to be interesting to people. People love to know what goes on behind the scenes and what's going on the ground. So that's what we're looking for. Excuse me. So your homework is a word I hate to use, but I'm going to use it anyway, is to have a little think about that rule of thirds formula and think about what content falls into each of those three categories that you can utilize. That will give you balance, and it will mean that the different people who follow you for different reasons are all being catered for. So if you combine that variety with delivering your content in a variety of different ways, you've got everything covered. You're doing everything that you need to be doing. Okay. Excuse me. Okay. So that brings us pretty much exactly to the end of this morning's session. I hope you guys have found it useful. If you've got any final questions, now is absolutely a good time to do that. I appreciate time-wise we're finishing off, but if you've got any other questions, please feel free to ask now. In summary, if I can summarize really everything that we've looked at, variety is probably the key word to come out of today. Try and deliver your content in different formats and in different ways, in particular with video, but also make sure that you are talking about different things at different times as well. The key thing that can kill people's social media presence is letting it stagnate, letting it get too uniform, and letting it get too samey. Mix things up as much as possible. Get creative, try different things. Never be afraid of trying something. If it doesn't work or it doesn't go down particularly well, that's absolutely fine. That's never a problem. Always try things first and see how they go. So in terms of what happens next, the video will be made available to you. I think Ryan will sort that out after today's session. I will send the presentation over to Ryan so that he can add that to it as well, so that you guys have got access to that. If you've got any follow-up questions, you can email me if you want to, just on pete@introtweet.com. So please feel free to do that. But the big thing now is just to go out and try all these different things that we talk about. Try and see which things stick. Do some time lapse, do some slow-mo, create some graphics, try them all, and see how you get on. And hopefully you'll notice the difference introducing that variety makes. Ryan, I don't know if you want to jump in and say anything at this point, or if so, please crack on.
No, all good. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. I've just put in the chat just some other bits of information about our next social media session. Hopefully you're all signed up to that already anyway, but a couple other workshops we've got coming up that may be interested for all of you. But yeah, that's it from me. Thank you very much, and we'll see you guys hopefully again next week.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ryan. So yeah, so thanks very much for joining us this morning. Hope you all found it useful. Great to see some good feedback. Hopefully I'll see you all again next week for the session that we're running then. And as I say, any questions in the meantime, please feel free to just drop me an email on pete@introtweak.com. So hopefully see you all next week. And yeah, thanks very much for your time. All right. Thank you, guys. Cheers.